Hi everyone, welcome. Today I'm going to be doing an election prediction map here. This is the presidential election for 2020. I just kind of give you an idea here of the map color palette. Tilt is between 0 and 2 points. Um, Lean we will have between 2 and 5 points. Likely will be 5 to 10, and safe will be 10 or more points. Um, Starting off with the on the East Coast here. I think Maine at large is going to go to Joe Biden by we'll put this as the color right here, put this as a likely margin. The reason being is that this coastal area here, which contains Portland and several other lobster fishing towns, pretty solidly Democrat. I think that the Susan Collins factor in this particular part will not favor Trump. Um, However, I do think that Maine's second congressional district will go to Trump by a likely margin. Trump won this last time by double digits, and I expect there to be maybe a little bit of regression in places like Orono, but I still think that overall he's going to perform pretty well and outperform the polls like he did last time. Maine's first district, I'll also have as likely Biden. Um, as Biden will win the popular vote, he'll obviously get these other two electoral votes. New Hampshire is interesting because Trump lost it by only 3,000 votes last time. But he also has not spent a lot of time in New England. It would not be shocking if Trump did win the state of New Hampshire, but I think that in this case it's going to go very slightly to Biden. So I will have this as tilt tilt Democrat. Um, Vermont is going to be this is Bernie's home state, so this will be a safe state. Trump could pick up a couple of counties here in the north in the northern part of the state like he did last time. But overall, there's just a lot going on with the with with this being a solidly Democratic state. Local elections, that's governor's race, for example, that's a little bit different story. This election cycle. Massachusetts, I expect Trump to lose Massachusetts by around 500,000 votes. Best case scenario, but probably around 650,000 votes. So this is obviously going to be a safe blue state for Joe Biden. Rhode Island and Connecticut, I think these are actually going to be much more interesting states. And the reason why is because these are states that Republicans are thinking of long-term 2020s going into the 2032 election. There's talk about getting these states to flip along with New Jersey. Early in the summer, Trump actually did invest resources in trying to flip New Jersey. If he doesn't win the election, that's going to be something I think that's going to be come up and and be scrutinized and analyzed. Um, Rhode Island's kind of an interesting state because Trump actually did very well in the western part of the state, but the heavier population in places like Providence and Warwick, that's in the eastern part of the state. Rhode Island is maybe a little bit of a sleeper, but I think it's going to go um, likely to, if not safe, to Joe Biden. I'll say the same thing for Connecticut. There's a lot of wealthy areas in Connecticut um, where I think folks are probably feel like they're overtaxed, particularly with the three different levels of government and the property taxes. And I also think that they're not very keen on some of the rioting and looting that has been going on down towards New York. That's probably affected their commute and uh, their mental health a little bit. So it would not surprise me if both those states went safe Biden, but I think that Trump is going to overperform in some of these more some of the more rural parts of these small states and some of the more posh areas of these states, because I do think that some of the Republican establishment is coming home to Trump. I think some of the third party vote will come home to Trump. And there's also a lot of independents in Connecticut. And I think in 2016, Trump, in terms of winning a lot of the counties in the western part of the state, actually did fairly well. New York is a state I know Trump would like to win and do well in, but I think it's going to be a pretty safe state uh, for for Joe Biden. I do expect Trump to actually win most of the counties in the state, mostly here in upstate, outside of Buffalo, Rochester, and Syracuse. Um, New Jersey, I think, is going to be it's been, I think, to the left where it has been in some of the last few election cycles. It wouldn't surprise me if New Jersey went likely instead of safe, but I still think it's going to be well. I'll go ahead and mark it as likely, as maybe like a 9 to 10 point win for Joe Biden. And then as you get down to Delaware here, Biden's been doing a good chunk of his campaign events in Wilmington. Um, so I would expect him to win Newcastle County by quite a bit. I don't think he's going to do as well in the bottom two-thirds of the state, as particularly in Sussex, as uh, as some people think. But I still think it's going to be safe for him. I do think that's more of his home state than Pennsylvania. Um, Maryland, I think Maryland is going to be. This is an interesting state. This is actually where Kim Klacik is running in Baltimore, and she has. Oh, sorry about that. And she has actually a lot of. Uh, she's actually polling fairly well considering the district. And her boost to Donald Trump is going to be, I think, very interesting for the state. So I'm actually going to go out on a bit of a limb here and say that Maryland's going to be likely for Joe Biden. DC, I think, is pretty safe. I think that the DC establishment vote and the residential vote, which is heavily African American, is going to um, this will be the biggest margin of the whole election for Joe Biden will be DC. West Virginia is going to be safe for Donald Trump. I fully expect Donald Trump to win this by easily by 10, if not 20 to 30 points. Hillary Clinton did not win a single county in West Virginia. I expect that to hold. I don't expect there to be a lot of regression, just because Biden is from this general area here. Um, I think Kentucky is also going to be safe. Um, McConnell has a Senate election, is up for reelection in this state, but I don't think that's going to be much of a factor here. If anything, he'll help Trump improve his margins in Louisville, because McConnell was at the RNC for uh, for Trump, and spoke, I thought, pretty well on his behalf. Tennessee also I have going as safe Republican. Alabama we can mark as safe. Mississippi we can also mark as safe. Arkansas, there was a poll over the summer that showed Biden within two. I consider that to be a substantial outlier. I think Trump is going to win this by double digits, maybe even by 20 points, pretty easily. I also think he'll be safe in Louisiana. I do expect New Orleans area for the Democrats to do well in the more urban areas, but I think overall the state will be safe. Oklahoma, um, I also think this will be safe. Both of the Dakotas, um, again, just kind of with the rural energy that Trump has, I don't expect Fargo or Sioux Falls to be a problem with him. The western part of the states these states tend to vote solidly Republican, anyways. Um, Kansas, I think this is a more interesting state because Democrats have kind of had their eye on this, and that really started with um, kind of during the Tea Party era when Sam Brownback got in and started doing all sorts of tax cuts that a lot of folks at the local level were not pleased with. Plus, there's not a lot of discussion about this, but Kansas City is experiencing some urban sprawl, maybe not as much as in terms of percentage wise as like Sioux Falls or Fargo has in the last couple of decades. But the growth of Kansas City and Johnson County is something that you'll want to pay attention to. I know that Red Eagle talked about this in his video. Um, Looking at Wyoming, I think that'll also be safe. I think uh, Joe Biden can do well in Native American country here, but overall the state is going to go to Trump by a pretty big margin. This could be his biggest victory in terms of percent. Montana, I expect it could go likely, but I think at this point I would mark it as safe. The same thing with Idaho. I think the McMullen vote is going to come home. Utah has not been polling well for Trump, considering that he's a Republican. But I'm going to go ahead and mark this as safe too, because I think that a lot of the McMullen and third party votes going to come home, and I also think Burgess Owens running in one of the more Democratic districts is gonna help him. Uh, Moving on then let's go ahead and skip over here, I guess, to the West Coast here. Um, I think California is going to be safe for Biden. It would not surprise me entirely if the state were to, if Trump improved a little bit in the LA Orange County area, just because he has been trending a little bit better with Latinos and with some of the the Ben Shapiro kind of establishment types who were very critical of Trump in 2016. I think a lot of those folks are going to come home. Um, and I also think there's a lot of people who don't normally vote Republican who are going to vote for Donald Trump. But when all said and done, I think that this is a pretty safe state for Biden. Oregon, I'll go out on a limb. I'll say this will be likely. I think a lot of the activity in Portland has soured a lot of people. I think that there's kind of maybe a little bit of a silent vote for Trump. Um, and I do think he will do very well in the eastern part of the state, but with most of the population concentrated on the coast, and particularly in Portland, there's 650,000 people live in Portland or so. Um, I just don't really see them. They're not necessarily happy with a lot of the looting and rioting going on, but um, it's still a very large city. It hasn't affected all parts of the city, and it's not driving them into the arms of Donald Trump. This kind of similar situation with Washington. Um, I don't really see a lot of um, a lot of reason why folks in Seattle and Tacoma in this area here up by Puget Sound would change their vote to Donald Trump. Again, I do think he'll do well out in areas like Spokane in the eastern part of the state, but this whole area here, I think, is going to stay pretty heavily Democrat. Enough to keep this in the safe column for the former vice president. Um, we'll round out the other safe state here. That would be Indiana. I do think that Indiana is going to be safe for Trump. He might regress a little bit in some of the areas, um, but I think they feel they've got the state locked up pretty well. It did go for Obama in 2008, but I think that looking at the trends that are happening in the rural part of the country and in particular in the Rust Belt, that um, the state, other than being Mike Pence's home state, is pretty much in lockdown for the president. Um, I'm also going to put Nebraska's uh, two electoral votes here will be safe. Nebraska's a historically Republican state. I think that Trump will have no problem winning 4 of the 5 electoral votes. The fifth vote, which is essentially downtown Omaha, I think that Trump can win this probably by a more tilt margin. Um, well, I'll just go ahead actually and make it lean. Trump has he has visited Omaha, so I think that is a pretty big deal as far as energizing his base, making them feel included and not being ignored. Um, Also, looking at the state of Missouri, like Arkansas, Missouri is kind of an interesting case here because Missouri, um, the last time around, Hillary Clinton only won 3 counties in Missouri: downtown St. Louis, downtown Kansas City, and then Columbia, which is where University of Missouri is at. So this state has, in the last 10 years, decisively moved into the Republican column. It used to be a bellwether swing state. Now it's solidly a Republican state. Um, and then if we head over to Illinois, um, Trump will actually win most of the counties in Illinois. The problem that Republicans have in Illinois is actually in Cook County, which is downtown Chicago. Trump lost Cook County in 2016 by almost 1.2 million votes. I do believe that was his may have been, other than Los Angeles County, his greatest loss of the election. He will do very well in the southeastern part of the state. He'll carry pretty much every county except for Champaign County by a fairly wide margin. Um, he'll probably lose counties like Peoria and Rock Island, um, and possibly Madison, which is kind of more of a suburban county in the Illinois side. But overall, he will do well in rural Illinois. But he's going to, I think, have some issues again in Cook County and in the suburbs. So not a lot of change here. He's not really paying attention. He has called out J.B. Pritzker um, several times actually, but I don't think that that's going to have much of an effect. And you actually have to be kind of careful with that, because if you call out someone's state or governor, their natural instinct is to defend their state. So um, I don't think there's going to be a lot of significant movement in the state of Illinois. Um, looking at Iowa, I think Iowa is going to be likely for Trump. I also think Ohio is going to be likely for Trump. I think he's going to probably outperform the polls in Ohio. I have not liked any of the polling that's come out of Ohio at all. Trump won this by almost, I think it was 800,000 votes. And Rob Portman, who was the senator for reelection at the time, won by over 1 million votes. So Ohio is somewhat like Missouri, where it's kind of become a much more reliable Republican state in the last few years here. Obama did win it in 2012, but since then the Republicans have done very well at really all levels of government in the elections. Um, Colorado, we'll skip over to Colorado because I think Colorado is an interesting case. The state was presumed for the longest time to be gone. Cory Gardner is also up for reelection here. A lot of people think that he is going to lose. Colorado's not really a state that's um, in play for Trump. I think if they thought it was, he would have visited there. But I still think it's going to go probably, I'll say likely, um, just because I think the rural part of the state will turn out heavily for Trump, but it's not that populous of a state. A lot of the population is kind of concentrated in Denver and the suburbs, and there's also been a lot of movement from folks in states like blue states like California up to Colorado, and this is the one state they've kind of brought their politics with them. So I think Colorado will go to the former vice president. Now, Virginia, this is the establishment state. George Bush won the state in 2004. I don't think John Kerry even had a lead in any of the polls in this state. But to kind of take a look here at what's going on in Virginia, the biggest problem with Virginia is, again, this is a state where Trump will win most of the counties, um, but the problem is Northern Virginia, and you've seen this the last couple of cycles. You saw it in the 2014 election when Ed Gillespie, the Republican, ran for Senate, and it looked like he had a lead in the state that he was going to win. But as the votes kept coming in from Prince William, Fairfax, Arlington, uh, Loudoun County, this is really where the Republicans tend not to do so well, as you can tell by the deep blue shadings in the map. There's also several smaller municipalities here where the vote tends to heavily skew towards the Democrats. And when you add all this up together with, and in Trump's case, with Richmond plus Norfolk, this is a heavy naval area. So there's a lot of government folks here. There's a lot of government folks who live and work up here in Alexandria as well. Because there's been so much migration from places like DC proper and from Maryland, and these folks have brought their politics with them. And you know, there's still a lot of Republican and conservative leaning establishment folks here. Trump's whole campaign message for 5 years now has been anti-establishment, and so these areas are probably not going to shift too much in favor of the president. And the problem is that he has to kind of do much better across the board to win. The one thing in his favor, though, is that I think that you can make a good argument that the Democrats at the state level have done a lot of overreaching, particularly with the Second Amendment. I think has probably been the really big issue in this state. I also think that the Charlottesville rally has helped energize Democrats a little bit, but that's also a lot of that news from both of those issues is kind of cycled out. And I do expect the state to go to Trump, or excuse me, to Biden, but I don't think it's going to be by as much of a margin as some people think. Republicans do tend, I think, to do better in Virginia than what some people would indicate. But I still think it's a fairly easy pickup for Biden. Trump has visited Virginia in the last month, but I don't think that it's really a state that he has on his radar. I think his visit there might have been a bit more of a head fake to get the Biden campaign to divide their resources more. The other state that I think could go likely to lean would be New Mexico. I would probably put this as a more likely state at this point. Although it could go lean, it would not surprise me if Trump won the state. There's a lot to do with energy in the economy, and that's really in the waning days of the election here. This election is a lot more about the economy than it is about the border wall or um, race relations or anything like that. So it would not surprise me if Donald Trump came out and actually won the state. There's also a little bit of a sleeper Senate race going on here too that I think we'll have to pay some attention to. So the remaining states on this map now are the ones that everyone's been talking about for some time for determining the election. I think that South Carolina is going to go to Trump by a safe margin. The folks over at MSNBC keep talking about how the state is in play, and I can kind of see their logic a little bit, but I think that Trump will have an easier time winning here than Lindsey Graham will. That's how much I think people here like the president. They like what he's doing with the economy, and they also do not like what is going on in the Democratic Party right now. Georgia. There's been some polling that's come out of Georgia lately that has shown the state to be a toss-up. I'm not sold on those polls. Atlanta has been in the surrounding counties in Atlanta have been voting fairly heavily left, from what they were even 10, 15 years ago. But I still think Georgia is probably going to go to Trump, by a likely margin. Um, and if you watch the Fox News coverage of the election, early last time in 2016, they actually thought Georgia was going to go to Hillary Clinton. But as the votes kept on rolling in and rolling in and rolling in, it was very clear that this was a very clear win for Donald Trump. Um, Florida, his home state, or his second home state, I guess, depending on your point of view. I think this is probably he's going to overperform, and I think it'll probably also it won't go likely, but I'll have this as lean Trump. It could be tilt Trump. He could only win it by 2 points. The thing about Florida is that it's always tends to always be a close state. Even in 2008, when Obama had his big win over McCain, Obama didn't even win the state by 3 points. But I do think Trump will actually do better than that. There's also some concern in Democratic circles about them getting turnout in places like North Miami. There's been some talk by pollsters like in analytics by Red Eagle, where he has suggested that Trump could regress in some of the suburbs, but make it up by winning more of the vote in uh, Miami-Dade County, which is down here. Um, I don't know that Trump is going to regress in the suburbs as much as people think. The knock on him in 2016 was that millennial women, he was going to get like 18% support, and I think he got almost 40% support. So I think Trump is going to get in a position where he's going to overperform expectations. North Carolina, uh, this is a state where I think um, Trump is probably going to be borderline tilt to lean. I would probably put it at this point as tilt Trump, just because I think that the folks in the Research Triangle are going to come out for Joe Biden. Um, but I also think that the voters in Appalachia are going to stick with Trump. I also think that Wilmington is going to stick with Trump. Um, this area here and then this area here will break, I think, fairly heavily for the president. And the early vote numbers actually look good in the state of North Carolina. Um, Nevada, I think Nevada, I'm going to have to put as uh, as tilt Democrat. The reason for this is because most of what's going on in Nevada happens in Clark County, and I do expect Trump to do very well in the rural areas. I think he will actually improve with the Latino vote. Um, but I think that the one of the drawbacks about being president and having by most metrics, especially when you factor in the pandemic, a strong economy is that you really don't get a lot of the desperate vote. There's not a lot of desperation, um, and you really have to, I think, be able, especially if you're on the Republican side of the ticket, be able to sell your message um, as to how your policies work. And I think that historically that's been difficult for the Republicans. I think Calvin Coolidge did a good job of it. I think Ronald Reagan did a good job of it, but that's uh, sort of it. I mean, Trump has done a decent job of reaching out to the working class, particularly in the Rust Belt, which we'll get to here in a second. But um, I still think Las Vegas is very posh, and I think if anything, if the state does go to Trump, it'll be because they just don't they can't see Joe Biden or Kamala Harris as leading the country. Um, Hawaii, on the other hand, this is going to be safe. very safe blue. Um, the early vote shows about 90% of Democrats. So even if Trump did have like a Reagan type victory, it would be very hard for him to win Hawaii in this current political climate. Alaska, there's been some talk about Alaska, but I think Alaska at the end of the day for Trump is going to come home as safe. There's just not a lot of people there, and I think that their rural population is they're very independent, and I just don't see a lot of things going on there that are going to change that anytime soon. Um, so looking at all of these remaining states, Texas, the Democrats, I think, wanting to flip this is still wishful thinking. I think I'm going to have this as um, I'm actually going to bump this up to likely. It could be lean. It could even be tilt if Biden can get the vote in places like Tarrant County and places like Houston. But even in 2012, Mitt Romney managed to almost split Harris County, which is downtown Houston, with Barack Obama. So this state really has no chance of flipping. I think it's maybe a coin flip between lean and likely, but it's I think a state that's definitely going to Trump. Um, Arizona is a state that I think is starting to come home for the Republicans a little bit. I think Martha McSally, who's the Senate candidate there, has got her act together much better. Um, and I also think that Trump campaigning there has helped. Um, and I do expect Trump to uh, carry the state by a lean margin. I think that this state is still a little bit fool's gold for Democrats, in the same way that Minnesota is kind of fool's gold for the Republicans. And to give you a peek at the total here, so it's still a close election. Trump at 260, Biden at 222, and we are finally down to the last four states here. Um, but before we get to that, to take a closer look at what's going on in Arizona here, um, I do expect Trump to perform better in Apache County. Um, I also expect him to perform a little bit better in Coconino. He will, I think, hold Mojave, hold La Paz and Yavapai, maybe not by the same the same margins. I think Biden could get into here a little bit, but I do think that he's going to hold enough of the central part of the state here, Maricopa, Pinal, Graham County, and Pima County, which is the more popular border county here. I think Trump will actually improve here, so I think his losses will be mostly offset. I think he could even gain a little bit in Santa Cruz County. I think it's going to be asking a lot for Joe Biden to win over 70% of the vote in Santa Cruz County. Um, but let's start off with the Midwest here. I'm going to jump ahead here, and we're going to take a look at Pennsylvania. Um, the issue with Pennsylvania that Biden has is that if you looked at this map in the middle of summer for party registration, every county here would be red, including Philadelphia, uh, except for these three counties here: Montgomery, Chester, and Delaware. And these are the three counties that Biden has sort of zeroed in on. He's done a lot of his events in Wilmington, um, but these are the counties that he has been heavily focused on. Um, he's talked about his roots in Scranton up here in Lackawanna County. The problem for Biden in this state is that very early on, Donald Trump saw the state for what it was, sort of bet that Biden was going to get the nomination, and started campaigning here very early. He came, I believe it was to Scranton, and um, really ever since has done a really good job of, from a strategic standpoint, of decimating the narrative that this is that Biden's just a hometown guy here. And I think it's paid off, because I've never seen Pennsylvania so energized in an election before. Um, and the energy is definitely on President Trump's side. Um, So let's take a closer look here. So Center County, this is where Penn State is. And I think that Trump is going to improve in this county. I think he's going to more or less either break even with or win this county. I think he has um, I don't know if he'll win Allegheny County. I think that's maybe a bit of a stretch, but I think he could definitely cut this to like, like a 50-45 kind of thing with third party voting. Maybe even get his numbers up into the high mid 40s, particularly in these areas that are a little bit outside of Pittsburgh. But the numbers from Allegheny County for Trump look really good. And as I had said earlier, this whole area here, which is Steelers country, Western Pennsylvania, this is going to be ground zero for the election. And boy, is it ever. I expect Trump, with the exception of Allegheny, to win all of these counties. He may even win. He may even be able to, I think, win Dauphin County, and Monroe, and as well as Bucks County. It would be, I think, pretty big if he could win Bucks County. But I also think that, like if you look at Chester County, he did get 42% of the vote here in Chester County, but it's Montgomery County and in particular Delaware County that he has lost in terms of percent. But as you can see, there's not really a lot of people here, and there's probably going to be 7 to 8 million people going to vote in this election in Pennsylvania. Philadelphia, uh, I think Trump is going to improve in Philadelphia. So the question that I have for Joe Biden in the Biden campaign is where the votes are going to come from, where he's going to be able to outperform a very energized Donald Trump, a rural part of this, a big rural state, or big rural part of the state rather, that is very energized. You can see him here, winning several counties by 60-70%. I mean, these are like Kentucky, West Virginia type margins in the rural part of the state. And so, having said that, I do think that the state will go to Trump. I will put this as I'm actually going to go take a little risk here. I'm going to say that this is going to go lean Trump. In Ohio, this should be likely actually. Because I think the energy is just enormous, and I don't think Trump is going to regress in the suburbs as much as people think. So that would essentially put Trump over the top and win the election. But let's take a look at the remaining states here in the Midwest. Michigan, I think, is going to tilt to the president, and the reason is that if you look at this map here, Trump has won several counties that Republicans really don't do all that great in. Counties like Macomb County, Oakland, he didn't win, but he did decent in. Wayne County getting 230,000 votes almost out of Detroit. That's nothing to shake your head at so much either. Winning Kent County, he almost won Muskegon County as well. Marquette would have been nice to win. A couple thousand votes there would have put him over. Kalamazoo and Washtenaw were the other big ones. Trump's not really focused on winning college towns in Washtenaw. He's much more focused on winning places like Flint, Oakland, Wayne, the Macomb, Lapeer. These are the working class areas. St. Clair, you're getting a little far out. But again, I think this is a state that Trump can hold, because I expect, with the kind of energy that he has, is that he's going to increase his popular vote total, and I think a lot of that is going to come from Michigan. I think he'll do very well in the central northern rural part of the state. I think this actually, Marquette, may have been more of a fluke than anything else. So I think that he can probably win the entire UP in this election, and probably run up his margins a little bit in places like Saginaw County and maybe flip Muskegon County. He even won Berrien and Van Buren County over here on on the Lake Michigan side. So I think the numbers look pretty good for the president in Michigan. The vice president and President Obama did visit Detroit. I think that'll um, maybe help out a little bit, but it's kind of clear though that the energy that was behind Obama Biden in 2008 is just not there in this election. Um, let's take a look next at Wisconsin. So Wisconsin is an interesting state because it tends to break for the Democrats more. So it's a much harder state for the Republicans to win. Um, I think that Trump, with his campaigning in the Iron Range, he's got a shot to flip Douglas County because this is where Superior is, and Superior is a much more working class town than even Duluth is. So it would not surprise me to see him flip Douglas, or maybe even Bayfield and Ashland. The Superior uplands are a much different sort of area of Lake Superior than the Minnesota North Shore is, which tends to be more of like a liberal arts colony, kind of from Duluth up to Grand Marais, and then you start getting into kind of Native American territory up towards Grand Portage. Um, but I do expect Trump to hold, places like Iron, Velas, Rhinelander, Menominee. That's a heavily Democrat county, but there's not a lot of votes there. It's going to be very key for the president to hold Brown County. This is actually a traditional bellwether county, and he won this by almost 12 points the last time. The other discussion is how well is he going to do in the counties surrounding Milwaukee. Places like Kenosha, which was, obviously one of the places where riots happened over the summer. Um, Racine, Trump, can he break 50% in Kenosha or Racine County? And I think he can improve in Milwaukee. Milwaukee's a lot different city than, Chicago or Minneapolis is. And these are Waukesha, Washington, and Ozaki. These are known as the WOW counties, and the numbers on early voting look really good for the president here. Madison, this is where this is sort of home base for Vice President Biden, and I think that the turnout is going to be there for Dane County. It's going to be key for Trump to hold his margins in Columbia and Sauk, if not improve them. This is the driftless area of the state, and this is places like La Crosse. You've got La Crescent over on the other side in Minnesota, which is not nearly as important as we'll get to in a little bit here. But places like the cumulative uh, turnout for Richland, Vernon, Crawford, Grant, Lafayette County. This is going to be, I think, very very important. And then you start getting up into kind of areas of the state which are suburbs and exurbs of Minneapolis, St. Paul, Pierce, St. Croix County, Pepin, Buffalo County. So I think it's going to be very important if Trump loses anything really in the uh, western part of the state, that he makes it up somehow in the eastern part of the state. And I still think he can do that. Um, but it does take quite a bit of energy for a Republican to be able to win Wisconsin. But I think that Trump has the right temperament to win the state. And but I think it's going to be by a small margin, because I think that the folks in Dane County have done a really good job of getting the turnout up. And I don't think there's going to be a lot going on as far as shifting in Milwaukee. Although I think Trump will do slightly better, and he might find a way to maybe flip like Douglas County or Bayfield County too. That'll help him out a little bit. So the last state is Minnesota. This is my old stomping ground here. Um, the interesting thing about Minnesota is you have the Minneapolis core area here, and then you have the the Iron Range. The indications is that Trump will flip the Iron Range, but that does not include Duluth. So it's going to be hard for him to just win the Iron Range and flip St. Louis County without making some inroads into Duluth. Now, if he can do that, I think he'll win the state. But I do think that like he will flip Carleton County. I do think he could flip Lake and Cook County. So as I talked about with Wisconsin, um, Wisconsin, much more working class farming up in the Superior Uplands. This is much more of a liberal posh area along the shoreline here. However, in recent years, there have been developments where a lot of folks are kind of moving into the interior part of these counties in between the boundary waters and the lake itself. So there is, I think, a lot of potential for Lake and Cook County to flip. At the same time, I do expect Trump to regress a little bit. I think it's going to be difficult for him, for example, to win, you know, 70% of the vote in Lake of the Woods, even though it's a really small county. But I do think that he'll regress in places, like Traverse County, possibly Wilkin County, Clay County. I think it's going to be difficult for him to maintain all of these margins. He can make up for it by bringing home the establishment vote in Rochester. I also think he can do better, a little bit better in Dakota and Washington County. If he can flip these two counties and hold his gains in the Iron Range, he's got a really good chance to win the state. The problem, though, for the Republicans is that Minnesota's sort of an ultimate tease. In recent years, the Republicans have had trouble breaking through. 47% has kind of been their ceiling for major candidates. And a lot of that has to do with a couple of reasons. One, Minnesota is not really a rural state like the Dakotas or Wisconsin. There's a very strong kind of sort of center left, I would say, environmentalist conservationist culture to the rural part of the state. I would say that that priority has kind of been put on hold a little bit. But the other thing is that most of the people live in these counties here. Now you've got locations such as Carver County and Wright County, which tend to be very Republican, as well as Sherburne and Anoka. Anoka is kind of that can be a little bit of a toss up. But the real, I think, humdinger for the Democrats is that they always get high turnout, not just in the Minneapolis core, but statewide. Minnesota is usually number one or number two in terms of voter turnout, regardless of what's going on with the election. Because so many people live in this urban core here, it tends to be a much more democratic state. And so I think that with the attention the Iron Range has been getting, it's maybe obscuring that fact a little bit. So I do think if Trump wants to win the state, he's going to have to flip Dakota. He's going to have to flip Washington. He's going to have to, cut down the margins in Minneapolis and St. Paul. What I've seen working against him in some recent data is that Biden may actually be able to improve his margins in these two counties. But I think he'll have to if he wants to have any chance of holding on to the state, because I think if Joe Biden drops below 62, 61% in either Hennepin or Ramsey County, it's going to be trouble for him. My prediction for the state is that Minnesota will actually head to a recount. Trump will have a lead in the state, but it will go to a recount. And I think ultimately it will go to, I will have this as tilt Biden because of that. So my final prediction here is Biden 232 and Trump 306. So we are essentially at the same number of electoral votes that we were in 2016. I also expect Joe Biden will have a slight edge in terms of winning the popular vote. And thank you so much for watching.